welcome back. So we're going to do the CNS still, but it's the brain and the cranial nerves associated with that. So brain, yay, cranial nerves. Before we even get through all of this, I want you guys to take a look at this. So these are all the regions that we're going to cover, and then we're going to break them down a little bit further in terms of cerebrum and all the parts of the cerebrum. But you guys already know the parts because you guys memorized all the bones that are associated with the skull, right? So we can make associations after. Right now, I want you to understand there are primary vesicles. So as the fetus is being formed, the brain is also being formed. So we start off with these primary vesicles, and this is in the fetus. And then it becomes secondary and finally the adult structures. So we're going to keep it as simple as possible. There's different ways to look at it. So this is primary, and we have the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. So fore, mid, hind, and they become different adult structures. And you guys will have to know this because I love this. This is how I ask my questions. So forebrain is essentially also known as encephalon. So these are all brain. Another word for brain is encephalon. So that's another word for brain. The forebrain is also known as the prosencephalon. The midbrain is known as the mesencephalon. And the hindbrain is also known as rump shaker, the rhombencephalon. So it is the booty or the butt, the hind brain. And encephalon becomes secondary structures. So the prosencephalon actually splits to become two different. The mes, fortunately, stays the same as mes. The rhom also splits to become two. And so how I remember this is tell your sister Diana that Mazinda met Miles. So tell Di that Mazinda met Miles. That's how I remember it. That's the only way I could remember it. Otherwise, you can kind of get lost in this. But how I ask the question is, well, the prosencephalon becomes the telencephalon and the diencephalon. Or the mesencephalon stays as the mesencephalon and ends finally as an adult structure called the midbrain. So the midbrain essentially becomes the midbrain again. It's the only one that stays the same. The Met and Miles metencephalon splits into two. So metencephalon becomes cerebellum, and it becomes the pons. And the myelencephalon becomes the medulla. Whew, this is so much, and yet this is actually, it gets really fun because it's so complex that your brain has to like make all these maps in order to remember it. That's what makes it fun. If you're not having fun, wrong class. If you're starting to have fun because it gets a little bit complex and a little bit fun to try and memorize, go back and forth, then that's the right class for you. Telencephalon becomes the big brain, so we just call him the cerebrum. And we have to go over the parts of the cerebrum, so we'll do that shortly. Diencephalon, di stands for two. Technically there's three, but we're just going to call it two. There's the hypothalamus and the thalamus. I'm going to thalamus to relay my information. So there's functions. This is just the structure. We're going to cover the functions.